All right. So, hi, everyone who's on this call so far, and welcome. I see you showing up. It's fun to see your names. My name's Jessica.
I'm Robbie, and I can't see your names, which I'm a little sad about.
Oh,
Oh, wait, maybe I can.
you should be able to see it.
Yeah, okay, I found it. Great.
Awesome.
Oh, hello.
Hi, guys. So, Robbie and I are going to be playing and hanging out with you and talking to you for the next hour about what everyone can learn about female orgasm. And there's going to be a couple ways that you as the participants can engage with us. So it's going to start with just me and Robbie talking, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Later in the video, you're going to get the chance to ask questions, and there's two ways to do that. You can type the question, so there's a Q&A, and you should be able to add your question on the chat, and we'll see it. And the second way is to raise your hand, and when you raise your hand, we can call on you, and there's a part in our webinar where if you want, for the brave ones among you, you can come on with us. And we hope we see a few of your lovely faces. So I thought we'd start just as a practice and have you all click the icon that's the hand to show us that you know how to raise your hands. So Allison, Hitesh, Lindsay, good. Jerry, Nathan, Rachel, Sarah, all of you, yep, good. Hands in the air, good. We've got a few more. And if for some reason you're on a computer and you can't see that icon, you can Q&A us and we'll see if we can help. So it looks like we've got a bunch of hands in the air. So Q&A us, send me a little note if you have any trouble finding the hand. So that's how to do it. And what I'm going to do is lower your hands, or you can just go ahead and click off. So when it comes time to ask us questions and we open the call for that, that's how to do it, and we'll bring you on the call. In the meantime, before we call for the Q&A, if you have any other questions, just type them. All right. Yeah. So I'm going to start by telling you the intentions for this session, kind of so you know what we're doing here. And again, I'm really happy that you all are on. And I want to say also, I was telling Robbie this before we got on, but I am so glad to be doing this call with you, Robbie. It feels like I do a lot of these in Dallas and solo. And so I'm like, so glad to have someone else in it with me.
Yeah,
okay.
It's good to be here.
So our intentions for this call are three. We want you to meet us and get a feel for me, and for everyone to get a feel for Robbie, and then to get a feel for how we work together as a teaching team, because this is the team that's going to be teaching in Dallas in mid-January. More on that in a moment. So first and foremost, we want you to meet us. We're going to tell you some stories about us. Second, we want you to meet the practice that we're calling conscious orgasm, that is the gateway to learning all about female orgasm, which is the topic of this webinar. So through our stories and through our sharing today, we want you to get a feel for the practice all about female orgasm. And then the last intention is we want you to sign up for the class so that you can have a weekend experience with us in mid-January, and we can go way deeper. Today is just an overview. We can go way deeper with you and share with you what you know and give you access to this work. So meet us, meet the practice, and sign up for the class. That's our intentions.
Great. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit about the structure of the call. It's very similar to what Jessica just said. We're putting on this class about a practice. So the first thing we're going to do is talk about who we are. The next thing we're going to do is tell you more about the practice of conscious orgasm and about how it connects with this kind of more general idea of female orgasm. And then we'll get some questions from you. And then at the end, we will tell you about the class and invite you to sign up. So that's what's going to happen over the next hour, and I think we should get started.
Deal.
Great. So, Jessica, how did you get here?
I'm getting interviewed. I love it. So I started my life in Plano. A lot of you are in the DFW area, so you know Plano. And I was a really good girl. I went to Catholic school. I was the oldest of 4. I was a very diligent student. I did not masturbate. I had no relationship really with sexuality. Like a lot of my friends who trained with me in this program, they were like, yeah, I've been masturbating since I came out of the womb, and I have this sex drive that started so early in my life. Not me. Like,
how old were you when you first masturbated?
I was a freshman in college. Yeah. Even though like my neighborhood girlfriend who kind of matured faster than I did sexually said, just put the pillow between your legs and rub until you get that feeling. And I was like, okay. And then I did that. And then she looked like she was getting a feeling. And I was like, okay, I have it. Just so that I was like as cool as she was, but I didn't get it. And I just was like a really good student and the top student in my school. And I was just kind of trying to survive, like living at home. And I did that by working really hard. And I was just a good girl. Like I followed all the rules and I wore a uniform for the first, 12 years of my schooling. And I was like, I don't know how to dress. And I was like pretty nerdy. That's the truth of it. And I didn't do drugs and I didn't drink. I just like stayed up late doing homework.
That's why you have a PhD.
Yeah, that was not unexpected by most people who knew me as a kid. So I started having sex in college. Like I was a good Catholic girl, so I waited until I was a sophomore in college. And it was on Valentine's Day that I lost my virginity to another virgin. Yeah, that's sweet. And my sex was fine. Like I had no problem with orgasm, but I didn't really have a relationship with my pussy. Like it was this entity that sent me signals like from another place outside of me. Like I would pretty much know if I liked a guy or if I wanted to have sex that night if I was in a relationship. But I wasn't like aware that there was a pussy between my legs throughout the day. Like I didn't have any real ongoing relationship with my pussy. I didn't even have a name for her. There was no dialogue. So my sex was fine and I had not much of a relationship. I got my PhD. I moved to Austin.
I gotta pause for a second. I love this phrase. I didn't even have a name for her. Like as though having a name for her, of course, like everyone does. So now I just need to ask you, you now have a name for your pussy?
Well, it's not like a proper noun. It's not like Matilda or
okay. All right.
Like she's my pussy. And
okay.
Like just that word alone, like a lot of women I know don't either like that word or don't have any word. It's like that thing down there, and there's almost not even an opportunity to say that thing down there because there's no discussion. Mm-hmm. Like a big part of what I want to convey in this call is that what I got from learning this practice is my ability to have a dialogue with my own body and then with my partners about my body and then out in the world connecting all of that in the way I move through space. But like I'm 40 now, and it was only like 4 years ago that this whole journey really began. And like I was fine with my sex. It was good. It just wasn't like a place where I put much energy. Mm-hmm. And then kind of bringing this all to a close, in 2012, I found the practice of orgasmic meditation. I was living in Austin. I just finished my first 2 years working as a VA psychologist, which is a pretty intense gig, and was taking a break. And I got my pussy stroked for the first time in February of 2012. And the partner who stroked my pussy was more than nervous than I was. It was this intro class. and he couldn't really find my clit most of the practice, but there was one moment where he did, and he didn't want anything from me, and I didn't have to be anything, and I didn't have to like prove myself or make him feel good. And that's moment is how I got here.
Wow.
And the rest, I think, is going to unfold over this call.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, thanks. So your turn, my friend.
I'm so curious. I just have to say, I'm very curious about who that stroker was and if I know him, and we'll get into that another time, but no.
All right, fair enough.
Yes, okay.
It was in Austin, I doubt it, but.
All right.
So,
Need something.
how did you get here?
Okay. I gotta sort through the pieces. I'll just say one thing. Parallel to your story, I also wore a school uniform through high school, even though nobody else did. Like after, like in the first year, we have different schools in England, but from the age of 11 to 16, I wore a uniform, even though once everybody was 12, nobody else did or had to. For the same reason, like I didn't know how to dress, and so it's just like I'm just gonna wear my uniform.
It's such a bond.
Yeah, I didn't. Yeah, I
Things you learn when you're.
So I'll start. I think there's a lot of places I can start, but for time, I'll start in a moment where I'm spent 2 years after just kind of like the most heartbreaking and difficult relationship. I was basically stuck in because I felt unable to kind of create the relationship that I wanted or meet the woman that I wanted to meet. That ended, and I spent 2 years kind of saying, I'm going to learn how to meet women. I'm going to learn how to get sex. I've always been very, very sexual, always been very, like, very different from you in that way of like, it's always been like very much on the surface for me. But it wasn't always very available. And so there was this period where I was like, training like a samurai, like going out to nightclubs 6 nights a week, approaching strangers, trying different things, just really like just wanting to feel like sex was available and not attached to all of these like really painful and complicated experiences of like, oh, these like this romantic expectation, like, oh, like if we're connecting in this way, then suddenly that means we're gonna get married and have babies and like this whole thing. So I was kind of trying to navigate all of that and trying to do it. I feel conscious of like I don't want to come across the wrong way, but trying to do it in a way that was kind of ethical for all parties involved. And I was doing that for a couple of years, and I was actually starting to get the kind of experiences that I wanted. And it was so much work. It was just so exhausting. Like it was a full-time gig, basically, to go to clubs and chat people up 6 nights a week and like do this whole thing, right?
You like essentially created a training program for yourself to figure out how to have the sex you want.
Exactly. And it just had started to work, but with this huge investment of effort. And then I very randomly stumbled across this place in San Francisco on Folsom Street, and I kind of walked in the door and I'm like, what is this place? And they kind of invited me in and told me this practice, this pussy stroking practice, which we're going to talk about in the call. We're going to talk about a variation or a different version of a similar practice, but so there was this practice, and they're saying, okay, here we do this practice here where you sit down with someone who may or may not be your lover, and you stroke her clit for 15 minutes. And you as the stroker, Robbie, you will feel all kinds of crazy sensations. This will be a rich and satisfying experience for you. And it's also a spiritual practice that's going to take you to all these crazy places and teach you all these things about people and connection. And I was like, this just sounds like a bunch of weird people getting their kicks in a weird way. Like, this is just like, they're just into like ritualistic sex or something. And it's really just, you know, and what's funny now I'm thinking about it, and I'm like, yeah, that's true. And like, it's a really cool way to get your kicks. So I can't say that isn't what was happening, but I said I'm going to give it a month. I'm just going to hang out with these people for a month. I'm going to try this practice for a month. And if I'm
So
not,
I'm going to stop you.
okay.
I think it's really important what you just said, which is like, when I first learned about this, I thought it was weird.
Yes, really weird.
Like I wasn't like, oh, makes perfect sense. I was like, well, I don't know. But how did you get over this is really weird and I'm actually going to try it?
I think it's funny because I think a lot of people have this story about like really wrestling with it and like having to penetrate through their fear and their resistance. I'm not a great example of that because for me, I was just in a really experimental phase in my life. I just kind of spent these 2 years like trying to rewire my mind. So at that time in my life, I was just like, I'll try anything. Like I'm not running for office in this lifetime. So like, sure, sign me up for this weird sex practice. I'm going to try it for a month.
It's like, what do I have to lose here?
What have I got to lose? Right. Mm-hmm. And so, I said, I'm going to give it a month. If I'm not feeling anything by the end of a month, I'm just going to write it off and I'm going to head out. Mm-hmm. And within about a week of doing this practice, maybe like a handful of times, I was like, oh, there is a whole universe being revealed to me that I had no idea was going on. And I also like, I was having great sex before. Like I loved my sex life. I was having great sex. And this was just like a different ballgame. And so I go ahead.
When you said that, when you go, oh, my head just like pulsed and I got like warm, like sweaty.
Great. Yeah, I had like tingles. So I stuck around and I dove deeply into that practice and then fast forward a few years and here we are putting on a class to teach people not the exact same practice but a similar practice that we've refined to how we would like it to be. So awesome. There you go.
Well, thanks. I learned some things.
Me too.
Yeah, that was cool. We'll talk about wardrobe challenges at some point. It leaves an indelible mark, man. It's like such every day.
But I feel like I would never know it looking for me. I feel like with me, you can probably still a little bit tell, but you've really transformed that aspect anyway.
Up leveled.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a ways to go, but I'll take that compliment. All right. So, friends, we are going to transition from telling you about us, kind of how we got here, to telling you specifically about this practice. So I want to clarify some terms so that we're all on the same page, and then I'm going to give you some basics, a definition to work from. So Robbie and I, actually we didn't say how we met. Robbie and I both trained at that school in San Francisco that he kind of stumbled into. It's kind of part residence, part training program, part school. It's called One Taste. We both trained starting in a coaching program in 2012. It was like a 9-month program. And One Taste teaches the practice orgasmic meditation. That was our starting point for this. In Dallas, and kind of fast forward now, 4 years, we're teaching a practice called conscious orgasm. Conscious orgasm is based on orgasmic meditation with some slight variations that are around the communication piece. So OM, or orgasmic meditation, and conscious orgasm are essentially the same practice, but the contemporary term we're using is CO, or conscious orgasm. Okay. So, and also Robbie and I didn't really talk very much in our coaching program. I don't think, it's just like FYI, but it's kind of like we planted a seed and then it took about 3 years to water and here we are. Okay. So what's the practice? I'm going to talk it through step by step. So conscious orgasm can be practiced between 2 women or a man and a woman. In the practice, we use the term stroker, who's always, or who can be a man or a woman, and then strokee, who's always a woman. In the practice, the strokee removes her clothing from the waist down, and she lays down in what's called a nest, a really comfortable space with a yoga mat, pillows, and blankets. The stroker, let's say for these purposes, a man, sits to her right in the nest. He puts his left leg over her waist and his right leg under her right leg. She butterflies her legs open. Then he wears gloves, applies lubricant, and uses his left index finger to stroke the upper left-hand quadrant of her clitoris with a feather light stroke, no firmer than you would stroke your own eyelid, very, very light. There is no goal to this practice. He's not trying to get her off. She's not trying to prove anything to him. The invitation is to connect and feel what it feels like in each partner's body, moment by moment and stroke by stroke. And that's it. It's a 15-minute practice. It's timed, and it's practiced the same way every single time. So whereas in sex and makeouts, every time it's different, even just a little bit, in this practice, there are no surprises. There's nothing that either partner needs to anticipate or plan. The structure is held the same so that the feelings can emerge inside the structure, the sensations. At the end of the practice, each partner shares what's called a frame, describes a sensation they felt. Then she puts her pants back on, together they put the nest away, and that's it. Doesn't mean they're lovers, doesn't mean she owes him or he owes her. The practice is complete. That's the practice that we're going to be teaching in January. We learned it as orgasmic meditation, and we'll be introducing it as conscious orgasm. Robbie, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, a couple things. I just want to say there is going to be there's a slight variation from orgasmic meditation. So a couple times, and I understand the intention to say it's basically the same thing. It's basically the same thing when we're changing a little. For those of you who know or care, for many of you that might not at all be relevant. And then the other piece I want to say is, two more things. One, like absolutely, there's like so much that doesn't change, and that's one of the things that's really powerful. It's like it's always 15 minutes. You always know like the things that are going to be said at the beginning and the end. You know what's going to happen afterwards. Like all of these things are the same, and what that allows is actually all kinds of surprises inside of that form. So inside of the form, every time it's different. So I want to just put that. And then the other thing that I would add is something about who you practice with. And for this, there's like a wide range. And so on one end of the spectrum, there are couples who are in a kind of completely conventional monogamous relationship, and they just practice with each other. That's great. At the other end of the spectrum are practitioners who may or may not be in a romantic relationship, but who practice with many different people, and kind of use this practice as a way of more as a spiritual practice and kind of as a way of connecting with themselves in a broader sense than just in the context of a relationship. And then in between that, there's any kind of any shade of gray of like, I mostly just practice with my lover, but there are a couple of friends that I practice with. There are, or a couple of practitioners that I practice with. Anything like that is available for like who it is that you actually engage this practice with. And I just want to say, I think like they're all totally valid, and depending on the stage in your life and where you're at, different things are appropriate. Yeah.
Cool. That's really helpful. I'm glad you added all of that, and especially the piece about, so there's a structure, as we're calling it, or I think you said the form of the practice, and we'll teach that, and we emphasize why it's important to adhere to it. A big part of why that is so that as Robbie called it, like the kind of infinite world of surprises and like arising, like real-time experience, that it can have the freedom to emerge. And as he said, it's different every time. I've never had two ohms that are the same, even though I've had long periods of time where I only practice with one person. We're going to talk next about this idea of female orgasm. it's a term that I think is challenging for some people. And like, what does it mean? And I'm a man. Why do I need to learn about this? And I'm a woman. I already know. And so I think that this idea of the form that doesn't change and the like roller coaster, like fireworks, like kind of chaotic tornado that does change is a good kind of segue into talking about what female orgasm is. Yeah. And so I also want to say at this point, if any questions are coming up and you all want to just type it on Q&A, we will do our best to weave it into our conversation. Oh, okay.
Classic.
Yeah.
The classic.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Okay. So we just got a question, and it makes me think maybe you could start with this section, Robbie?
Sure. Yeah.
What do you think?
So I guess, okay, so in response to this question, which I'll give you the basic gist of the question is, what about a practice where the man's cock gets stroked? And so here's what I'm going to say about that. Okay, so I'm just going to more generally answer the question, and I'm going to try and do this briefly because we do have a lot to say, but I think this is a really important question for half of you listening to this call, which is what's in it for the man? Okay, like, all right, this is about female orgasm, it's about pussy stroking, and there's this kind of dynamic where the woman is receiving and the man is giving, or that's kind of how it looks on the outside. So I want to talk about that. I actually just, and then I will specifically talk about cock stroking as well. But I actually wrote something today that answers this question, which I think I might just read to you. I don't normally do this. I'm a very extemporaneous person, but I liked what I wrote. So I'm just going to read it to you. So what's in it for the man? It's fun. Is number one. It's fun. Like, you get to stroke someone's pussy. That's fun. And especially you get to stroke someone's pussy without having to like contort yourself into weird little knots about like what your intentions are, or why you want it, or what else you're available for, or like all kind of getting into weird expectations about what she's available for, and like, what does this mean? Like, all of that gets left behind. You just get to stroke someone's pussy for 15 minutes. It's great. That's fun. Okay, number one. These two are a little, well, this next one is it's a little tongue-in-cheek, but it cultivates gratitude in your practice partner, whether that's your like actual partner or someone else. Like, what I notice is if you stroke women's pussies, they like that and they're happy you did it. So if you want women around you that are pleased with you, it's not a bad thing to do. Okay. So this is kind of like at the shallower end of the pool, but it's still, that's a nice benefit. It also cultivates. Go ahead.
I've heard this answer many times, but not quite like that. I love that that's on your list.
For sure. I mean, for sure. It cultivates aliveness and orgasm in your practice partner. So again, whether that's a lover or just someone that's in your life, you get to see them light up and kind of fill up and like soften. And that's just a really beautiful thing to see in the people in your life, especially if it's a lover, but whoever. Like, there's something that happens when a woman is being stroked regularly that it's just a satisfying thing as a man to see. Okay, and then we get into, so those are things that kind of like about your partner. Then most specifically what it does for you, so it teaches you to attune to incredibly subtle shifts in energy in anyone that you're with. And what's weird is this begins to translate into reading people's minds and reading their intentions. I'm not going to talk more about that. I have stories about that. It's very weird. When I was at the peak of my practice, I just started knowing what people were going to say before they said it. And that's just cool. Like, it's just cool. It has a lot of applications in business and work, all kinds of things, in relationship. But it teaches you this attunement, which I think is like solely missing in people's relationships in general. And so this is the next thing. It gives you connection. It fills up this empty tank. Even as a man, just being with someone who's in that kind of vulnerable, intimate state where her energy is like connected and moving in that way, it at first this is subtle and you're not necessarily going to notice, but over time you start to realize like, oh, it's filling up my tank. And in a way that I was like hungry and then maybe kind of tight around my hunger and like either needy or just like really shut down, all of that begins to soften up, and it becomes just way easier to come in and out of connection with people. You just have this like basic intimacy nutrient, and I really do think it's like a vitamin that many people are missing. That nutrient is just filled, and then when you go to connect with someone, it's not from this place of like famine and starvation. It's from a place of like full, and what can we create here? Okay, I'm gonna try and speed up.
I just want you to know I have a question. Do you want to finish your thing?
I'll finish my spiel. I'm just gonna cut a few things. It's funny. Okay, the next one is it's slow enough that you can actually feel yourself disconnecting and reconnecting. Which that alone, that training, because the whole orientation of the practice is in connection. That training teaches you so much about connection. I can't even begin. It translates in so many places. And then the last thing I'll say is, well, I'll say like when that tank is full, I'm going to say a little bit more about when that tank is full as a man, you get more confident, you feel more like yourself, you feel more alive, you feel more connected to the people around you, you're more connected to your intuition, and you're more connected to something greater than you. All of this stuff just starts to relax inside you, and new things become available. As a man, just from this simple practice of like stroking someone's clit for 15 minutes a day. And then the last thing I'll say is like beyond any of the kind of specific benefits, it becomes an art. And because of the limitations, because of the container and the boundaries and the explicitly creating expectations, you can both enter a realm that's often not available in sex. You are creating art out of the shared connection, out of the sensations in both of your bodies, like two musicians improvising together, moment to moment. And honestly, like this transcends any kind of benefit, like, oh, this is good for your life. Here are the 3 great things about this that will, translate somewhere else. It's like, it actually transcends any of that, and it becomes its own motivation. It's so beautiful and satisfying. It's just one of my favorite things to do, and that's what I'll say. So that's what's in it for the man. I want to say something about cockstroking, but Jessica, you had a question as well.
I feel full.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So the one thing I'll say about cockstroking is, so there is a brother practice, I suppose you would call it, of cockstroking introduced way down the line. I would just even take it off your mind. And the reason is, once you get this practice, once you actually start to learn, there's so much benefit from it that honestly, like I'm an advanced practitioner now. I've been doing it for 8 years, almost 8 years, and I'm still way more interested in stroking than in being stroked. Like stroking is so much more interesting, and I think that is to do with masculine and feminine dynamics. I think I don't want to get into the technicalities of why that is, but as a man, stroking does something for me that getting stroked is fun and it's fine and it's like cool and you learn things, but stroking as a man is just like so much richer, and I'm still so much more interested in stroking than being stroked. So I would just say that about the idea of cockstroking, and it might be counterintuitive, but this practice, it teaches you how to get nourished in a way that's different than the kind of cultural norms of like, well, I did for you, now you do for me. It's a different source of nutrient, but it's actually way richer and more satisfying. That's what I'll say.
Thank you. I feel like first really gratified to hear you go big with that question. Like there's a couple ways that you can kind of answer it and be like, yeah, that's not important. And I'm so glad that you took the big answers way to share that. And what comes up for me is I think that it's like we come into sex thinking we're there to get off. Like we're there to have a release. We're here to come, we're here to ejaculate. When we say orgasm, most people think of that moment of release, like a woman's pussy contracts and a man ejaculates. And it's like, if we don't know there's anything else available, we're not going to ask for it. And so in some ways, it's like, why not the equivalent thing for a man comes from that place. It's like, it's a great question. It comes all the time. But of like, I didn't know there were other options.
Yeah.
But if we knew there were other options, like, and had a taste of it, I can't imagine anyone wouldn't want this, that feeling. And you use the word kind of full or hungry. And that's like a food languaging, right? Like, I'm hungry, it's time to eat breakfast. Or I'm full, I don't need to eat anymore. But the way, the context for this, I just want to add to that a little bit, is it's like we get hungry for relationship and connection like we get hungry for food. And one way to notice we're hungry is we feel lonely, or we feel kind of despairing. I think the winter, it's a little more common even. It's like I don't know how to get the connection I want. And if all we know is the way to get that is to put a cock in a pussy, then that's what we're going to ask for. But in this practice, there is such a widening of the possibilities. And when I hear you say, like, I'm much more interested in stroking than being stroked, I hear you saying, I want the full range. I don't just want the quick hit. And there's something about the benefits of this practice sustaining. Like, if you eat, in 3 hours, you're going to be hungry again. Like, we have to feed ourselves food-wise every day. If, for me personally, when I come, like if I have that release, I'm pretty depleted, and then it takes me a while to kind of build up my energy. But for me, at the peak of my own practice, or my practice of getting, of having my pussy stroked and being in the practice of connection, like, I needed less sleep. I found that I was able to actually expand and handle more in my life than I kind of ever had, like just in terms of my creative projects. I don't mean like in sex. And I had a really big sexual appetite. And it wasn't like, oh, just like have a power bar and keep going. It was like, I really want to taste everything. So I think that distinction is really important. So now I'm going to bring some terms in. So when we say female orgasm, we're talking about that infinite range of experience that has us feel full. We're talking about our ability to feel sensation moment by moment without having to get anywhere. We're talking about what turns us on, as opposed to how do I fix it or how do I get off. So female orgasm is very much tied to this idea of this practice being a meditation, because it's about discovery, it's about presence, it's about not knowing what's going to come. And in that regard, and this is a really big piece, it's about letting go of control, which is really intensely scary and really intensely rewarding. And that's the kind of orgasm we show up for in this practice. One more piece, which is to say that, so the counterpart is male orgasm, or a more production-driven orgasm. And we're not talking about that being a bad thing. I personally am a big fan of getting off. Like, I love climax. And my sex life wouldn't be complete without it. What we're saying is there's other options on the menu, and it takes both to really kind of have a full expression as a sexual creature. So this is not instead of, but this is in addition to, that we have options here on our sexual menu. You're nodding your head.
I'm nodding my head. It's great. I'm just wondering. I want to look at time for a second, and I have another question. And we are ever so slightly over time, but I think we can do it. I would love to hear a little more. You've had a lot of experience training people, and specifically women, and also just in being around this practice, seeing the kinds of things that happen for women when they engage in it. And I would just love to hear a little bit more about that, of like, okay, if a woman is listening to this call, and she's kind of saying, okay, well, now I've heard about what's in it for the man. Tell me a little more, like, what's in it for the woman.
Totally. So I'm actually just going to start with my own experience. Those of you who were here on the beginning of the call heard me say I wasn't a very sexual creature when I was young, and I was kind of like this big energy trapped in a really good girl, and I didn't know how to translate my inner experience out into the world. And I knew that like I had a certain amount of something that was very powerful. I just knew that from a young age. And it came out in being a student council president, and writing good papers in grad school. It's like I didn't have an outlet for the power source that was inside of me that felt like it fully expressed me. And when I first lay down to Om, it was like taking parts of me that had been entirely separate and creating an electric circuit that suddenly wired me together. So I spent a lot of my adult life knowing that there was something more and searching for growth. Through yoga, through traveling to India, through sweat lodges, through academia, through activism. But no one ever said, stop looking out there, or look out there, but also look between your legs. What happened for me as a woman is that I discovered how to feel my body, and then how to connect my genitals to my voice. So people who know me now, like Hitesh on this call, he says, we spoke on the phone recently, and he said he saved my contact as the powerful woman. It was very funny. I hope that's okay, Hitesh, that I said that. But people who know me now would have no idea how long I have struggled with being able to find my words. And so what happened, and will always keep happening, I know, in my own practice as I keep practicing, is that I connect my power source with my ability to express myself. When I feel sensation, I know how to keep talking. Instead of contracting or closing down or running away or attacking, at my best, I know how to say what I'm feeling and navigate. And that means I know how to ask for what I want. So I focus a lot on the communication piece, but there's a simpler and even deeper piece. I have a very strong masculine side. It's like I'm a PhD, I'm an oldest child, I'm a good leader, and I have kind of just an innate drive. And my own practice helped me find my feminine. By that I mean, there's something that laying back in this nest, opening my legs and saying yes to surrendering to the connection, there's something about it that touched a part of me that didn't know how to trust up until that point. My masculine shows up when I feel like I need to take care of myself, and my feminine is the one who can be receptive. For me, this is a spiritual practice. This practice kind of teaches me how to really be part of something bigger, how to drop in and lean in to being cared for by something that isn't about my engineering it or my doing it. It's not just the product of my sweat and tears. There's something that can happen when I actually release that's the greater magic. And and then my sex got really good too. From having gone from like being a virgin until I was a sophomore in college, at the age of 35, I started making up for lost time. And that's another story. But I really learned what it is to actually be able to experiment and explore in sex. And now I have a lot more to say as a sexual creature because I let myself really feel a fuller appetite than I'd ever felt. I credit this practice with really being the powerful woman that I am.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah,
that's my curiosity. We are going to move on and see if we can get everything we want still covered in the class, in the webinar. So that's some stuff about the practice of conscious orgasm and about this kind of broader idea of female orgasm. I want to tell you a little bit about the class, and I'm just going to tell you some basic details, some basic logistics. So what happens in the class? It's a day and a half. It's and you can find all this on Facebook as well, so don't worry too much. But 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. Saturday, January 14th, excuse me, 2017, in Dallas, and then it's 9 to 12:30 p.m. on the following Sunday, the next day, Sunday, January 15th. So it's a day and a half. During the class, it's going to be Jessica and I and our support team, and we will teach you the practice, kind of take you through all the steps. We will give a demo of the practice, so you'll actually get to see it being practiced and feel what that's like. And there'll be 2 labs, so you'll actually, if you want to stay and do the practice yourself with guidance from ourselves and experienced coaches, you can, and that's a huge part of how this practice gets transmitted. What else we'll be doing is kind of different exercises to help you integrate. So it's one thing just to like know this practice, but like how do you actually take this awakening sexual energy or this awakening awareness and integrate it into your whole life? So, you know, we'll touch on and we'll teach you the basics of some practices to do that. And the whole class is going to be, you know, the actual practice part of the class is relatively short, but the whole class is going to be an opportunity and a learning of how to be present in connection with a group of people as a sexual being. Like, what does that look like? What does that mean for you? And how can that be fun for you? Like, how can I bring my sex to this group in a way that feels good and connecting? So that's like this huge exploration through the whole class. And it's a really unique feeling to be in that kind of context, and I love it. So that's the basic outline of the class. Okay, Jessica.
Awesome. And then I'm going to say one thing that as I've been talking with people, this is a question that comes up a bunch. So I want to lead with this, and then we want to hear what questions haven't been answered by what we shared. So like 2 out of 3 times when I invite someone to this class, they say, oh, I don't have a partner, so I can't come. And we have a good number of people already signed up. Most of them happen to be single. So here's the thing with the practice of conscious pussy stroking is that because of the container, there's the opportunity to practice with someone who may not be your intimate partner. We've said that multiple times on this call, but I want to underscore that we're going to be creating a space where we have at least one thing in common, which is we want to grow sexually. And so we will be there as practitioners in training, supporting one another in that learning. And within that intention, you can ask someone in the class to partner with you. You as a woman, you as a man. We gender balance this class so that there's an equal number of men and women, meaning everyone will have the opportunity, should you choose, to practice in the class, to find a practice partner. The lab is optional. We strongly encourage you to stay. It will be your choice. But people who are not partnered, we're really excited to have you in the class, and we hope more of you sign up. People who are partnered, love for you and your partner to come to the class, and the 2 of you practice in the labs. Maybe that someone who's partnered comes to the class and wants to practice with other people, and your partner practices with other people. So how you do that is up to you. The door is wide open for anyone at any place in your relational life to benefit from this.
Great, thank you.
Okay, yeah. So I think we're at the place where we'll want to open for your questions. And I want to say this can be a specific question about logistics. It can be a question of like, I don't know if this is for me, and some concern. It can be like a comment, like, I really appreciated this. What struck you about what we shared, or where did you feel the most in what we covered in the last 50 or so minutes? So I know there's about 20 of you on the call, and we're thrilled to have so many of you here. Why don't you go ahead and raise your hand if you want to ask a question live, or type it from the Q&A just like Hitesh did. Thank you for starting the Q&A, Hitesh. And we can just speak to it as we get it. So this is the moment where we pause and let you all come up with your, it's almost like, you know, for a lot of people, I think it's like, it's like, how do I, what's the specific question?
Sure.
Right? Like, how do I put to words this feeling of, I want this and I'm scared? So if you might be one of those people who's like, I want this and I'm like, freaks me out, then one, you have a lot in common with me and Robbie. I learned about OM 3 years before I took my first class. And when I first learned about it, the guy I was dating in the Bay, I was on internship in the Bay. His name was Matthew. What was his last name? Like, very intense Jewish dude. He was like, oh, I'm in this practice. And he told me about it, and I was like, la, la, la. Like, I didn't want to hear any more about that. And then 3 years later, I decided to take my own class. And it was a process. Okay, oh, good. Well, there we go. They're coming in on the Q&A.
Yeah. First one I see, how is this class the same as the former introductory one? How does it differ? So that's going to be to you, Jess, because that was your class, I assume.
Yeah. So Patrick, thank you for your question. So some of you have taken my own classes in Dallas before. They tend to be an afternoon class, a 3 to 4.5 hour class. I've taught, what, half a dozen here in Dallas. And so for those who have graduated those classes, I would love to have you in this class, and this is why. So between Austin, San Francisco, and Dallas, I've taught a dozen of these classes, enough to see that I feel that there are gaps left when we only do a 4-hour class. My experience is that people who graduate that class, it's the minority of people who go on to actually be able to sustain a practice. Because one, we don't take enough time to really help you ease into it. Two, you need more than one lab. The first time people learn it, people tend to be so flooded that nothing really gets in. So the next time you need to practice, it's like, what did I just learn? So this class has 2 labs, but we're doing additional communication work so that the way you learn to communicate when you leave this class can give you a bridge from, okay, like a day and a half with these sex teachers, and that's really cool, but it's like sometimes people kind of leave the class and they leave all the awareness. And we want to emphasize ways that you can learn how to integrate what we're teaching you so that you know how to bridge this weekend with the rest of your lives. I'm not interested in giving you an experience that's just 2 days of your life. I want to give you tools that you can take to transform the rest of your living sexing days. And so it feels like a more immersive, you like that, sexing days? It feels like a more immersive experience is the next step after you've had a taste from the intro classes, if you're someone who wants to take this into the rest of your life. Okay, how about you take the next question?
Great. So anonymous viewer, hello, asks, I'm an experienced OMA, not sure that, I mean, it's not exactly a question, but not sure this is for me. Sounds good, love your energy, thank you, but very basic. And I would say to that, yeah, maybe not. We're teaching a practice which is pretty similar to OM. If you already kind of feel great about your own practice, it may be not the right class for you. And we are going to have a different take on some things for sure. Like there are distinctions we made from the OM practice and from the kind of OM culture that I would just love to have you there. I don't even know you, but that's when I read that, my response was like, oh man, like, okay. And I would like, hey, experienced OMA, I would love to have you in the class. So that's what I got.
Yeah. And I'll add, it's like I practice yoga and I go to a yoga class every other day. And I learned at a certain point that I would stop learning, getting things out of these classes if I didn't take a ton of responsibility for my yoga practice. Because it's like very similar every class. But if I actually tune into my body every day, I find new things every class. And I think these sexual practices, like this one specifically, is similar, where it totally depends how you want to allocate your time and money and so on. But this is an infinite, like there's no end to what can be learned here. And I know myself, I took the intro class a number of times. I took the communications class a number of times. It's like, what more? How do I actually take not just the technique, not just the form, but how do I learn how to like way expand my capacity to feel? And if you've got the foundation, then you have a higher chance to actually tap into like the magical, bubbly exploration that's available through this practice. It's not just like, I know the basics. It's like, I want to go on a ride and I want to know how to really condition like my orgasmic muscle. It's like, you don't stop brushing your teeth because I brushed them yesterday. It's kind of like that. So totally respect practice to Omer. Like, thank you for being in the world. And if you want to go further, we'd love to play with you January 14th and 15th.
Okay. I think we want to move on to the last part.
Yeah, I think so too. Thanks everyone for your questions.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks to that last comment as well, Hitesh. We think so. I don't know if people can read it. Hitesh said, this sounds like a good container of practice to connect with like-minded people. And yes, I think so.
Man, it's hard to find us, huh? You gotta thump the ground and say, I'm here, where's the rest of you? Okay, so here's our offer. This class has a week left for the early bird price. We've got a good number of people signed up, a good number of people considering the class. We want to thank you for being on this webinar. So for the 18 people who were hanging out with us today, we have a special offer for you. Here's the offer. The ticket price for this class at the early bird level is $349 for a single and $649 for a couple. We are, with Robbie twisting my arm, willing to drop those prices, again, for the webinar viewers only, to $299 for a single and $549 for a couple. That's a $50 and $100 savings, respectively. That's because we want the right people in this class. We want the people who are willing to learn, who are willing to show up, who are willing to take the extra time to tune in. And my guess is that's you all. So if you are interested in taking advantage of the webinar special, you have until 5 p.m. Central Time today to text me. Here's my number. It's 480-993-5562. I'm going to say that one more time, and I bet I'm going to get a visual aid in a moment. 480-993-5562. Send me a text. Tell me I was on the webinar. You have until 5 p.m. Central Time today, after which point I will not be by my phone, to send me a text. There it is on graph paper. Let me know you're interested in the special webinar sales price. It won't be on Facebook, and you won't be able to click anywhere to find it. It will only be by texting me today, anytime between now and 5. We'd love to sign you up this afternoon and add you to the growing list of people who will be joining me and Robbie and our amazing production team Saturday, January 14th and Sunday, January 15th, 2017 in Dallas, Texas. For Conscious Orgasm, anything you want to add before we click off, Robbie?
No, just great to be here, and thanks everybody for joining us. And yeah, I hope to see many of you in January. I'm really excited for this class.
Yeah. Bye for now, you guys.
Bye-bye.